In this video, I look at Hollow Knight, an extremely popular 2D Metroidvania platformer released in February 2017 by Team Cherry, a small Australian indie team. Hollow Knight has over 275,000 reviews on Steam, of which a whopping 97% are positive. Based on pretty accurate estimation tools, at $15 and 275,000 reviews, the net revenue after regional pricing, discount, refunds, Steam cut and VAT could be around $58 million. People buy, play and rate games positively if they have something great to offer. Let's dive in to see what makes this game so great. And I'm not gonna clone it, I just want to learn some good design practice. Warning, this video may contain some early spoilers of Hollow Knight, but I don't think they'll impact your experience if you decide to play. Hollow Knight's main menu is kept simple, so you don't have to go crazy with a flashy menu, just follow the theme and make it clear and functional. The game sets the mood already in the menu with somber music, a dark monochrome theme and blurred hand-drawn visuals and particles. When you start a game, it contains a short cutscene with visual hints of what the objective in the game may be. Early on, you can only run left and right, jump and attack. These basic abilities are your only controls for quite some time as you learn to navigate the platforms, knock down barriers, defeat basic enemies and avoid hazards. The controls are displayed on the screen to the player. I learned the importance of showing controls when I participated in Ludum Dare, where you make a game in 48 hours. Even in the most basic games, when new players try it out, you must show and tell them what to do, or they will lose interest and quit. The character controls follow popular platforming physics with no lag or inertia to give the player direct control without feeling floaty. The jump mechanic also follows a popular mechanic where the duration of pressing the jump button controls the jump height. You will be surprised how complicated it is to do jumping properly in a platformer. You will find that the jump height will be different on computers depending on frame rates, even when you compensate for delta time. There are entire GDC talks on this topic. Reliable and consistent jump height in a platformer is essential because it dictates the level design of gaps and heights of platforms. Hollow Knight jumping also lets you control the player directly in mid-air. The jump mechanic also uses the concept of slower ascent and faster descent. This jump trajectory dates back to Super Mario, and players may expect or even demand this behavior. If we go beyond my own analysis, in an interview the developers said, "We wanted the players to feel totally in control of their characters at all time, so our model for movement was the Mega Man and Mega Man X series." The Knight has no acceleration or deceleration on horizontal movement. The jump has a lot of initial lift, releasing the button cuts the vertical speed quickly, and the dash completely arrests vertical movement, shooting you forward instantly. This all adds up to an unusually high degree of control mid-air. It all started with a nice run and jump, the very first things to be coded. Use player control physics for running and jumping that people are familiar with. No laggy inertia. Allow direct mid-air movement, consistent jump height regardless of system and frame rates. Jump button press duration controls jump height. Slow ascent and fast descent. Start with a few controls. Present the controls in a tutorial-like fashion on screen. Program the movement code early and before any level design. For Ultranova, I will likely follow all of these takeaways. They're so established, so if you don't follow them, you'll get slammed in the reviews and comments. The early level design teaches you the attack button with a few static barriers and simple enemies. The environment is visually destructible and you can slash objects as you run past. It's nice to have something to do as you go back and forth in the world. Hollow Knight's world is called Hallownest. It pans left, right, up and down as you run, but areas are sectioned and you will find dead ends, rooms or gateways to other areas. I think this helps the player learn the world and recognize rooms, areas and the gateways between them. It's also good during the development process where you can independently control camera limits in different rooms. I also noticed that enemies and environmental objects respawn in sections. You will always have something to smash, and more importantly, it allows you to practice attacking and dodging enemies. Killing enemies also rewards you with Geo, the currency in Hollow Knight. You can buy items like maps and charms to improve your mapping abilities. Had it not been for the respawning of enemies, you would not be able to earn enough currency to purchase items. Respawnable enemies for practice and earning currency are crucial in the design. In Ultranova I will use currency too. And the respawning of enemies, whether distance-based or controlled in a different way, will be important to allow the player to earn enough currency to purchase items. In the past, when I've developed platformer prototypes, the level design process was me dragging and dropping interesting blocks to shape progressively more difficult levels. The level design in Hollow Knight was not just randomly assembled. Careful design considerations and meticulous process lay behind the map design of Hollow Nest, where areas fit together like a logically balanced jigsaw puzzle. In the interview I read, Team Cherry confirmed that maintaining that sense of discovery while giving players a useful map of the world was the single biggest design challenge faced during development, and that the map and mapping system took a long while to come together. Initially, the player is restricted to Dirtmouth and Forgotten Crossroads. Over hours, players begin to familiarize themselves with certain areas as new paths are discovered and eventually unlocked. To prevent the player from progressing too fast, areas are blocked off either by bosses you can't yet defeat, through puzzles, or require abilities you don't yet have. To assist the player in navigating the world, areas have distinct colors, graphics, music, and ambience. Shortcuts between areas can also be unlocked, which is a clever way to gradually reduce the need to tediously traverse long distances as the world expands. The secret to any great Metroidvania is how well its map interconnects and loops back on itself, opening up previously inaccessible areas as abilities are obtained, giving players a true sense of discovery, all while subtly painting narrative seeds throughout, the Team Cherry interview article said. Another trick Hollow Knight implements is to change the world over time. For example, enemies mutate to become tougher in areas you've had access to from the start. One way of learning about the world and the story is through communicating with NPCs, like Cornifer, the cartographer who can be found in all areas. From Cornifer, you can buy maps to understand the Hollow Nest world visually. Care has been taken to guide the player to Cornifer, as you find scattered papers and you can hear him humming before you see him. An interesting comment I read in the developer interview was, "Instead of focusing on ways to direct players, we focused on giving them interesting things to stumble on as they found their way through the world. Hidden characters, treasures, and battles." After hours of play, I got the Vengeful Spirit spell, a ranged attack that allows me to defeat the boss, preventing entry to the Green Path area of Hollow Nest. The contrast between the dark blue dungeons of Forgotten Crossroads and the lush green vegetation in Green Path was refreshing, and it encouraged me to explore the newly discovered area. I can really begin to understand the appeal for players that enjoy this type of game. Clever level and world design are essential to create a successful game. Restrict areas of the world through bosses, required abilities, and puzzles. Make areas memorable and distinct through graphics, music, and ambience. If you use a currency, make sure the player can earn it continuously, for example through respawning enemies. Always give the player something to do, like respawning destructive environments and enemies when traversing the same area many times. Introduce shortcuts in the world as it grows in size. Guide the player through visual hints, music, and sound effects. Reward the player by letting them find hidden characters, treasures, and battles. Integrate practice areas for newly obtained abilities. Carefully design enemies and levels to match the pace of learned abilities. Playtest a lot and get new, fresh players throughout the testing process. As players gain experience, their capability to give progression feedback diminishes. For Ultranova, I still have to decide whether to make a Metroidvania or a more traditional action-adventure platformer. I enjoy the action elements more than the time and dedication required to navigate the world, so I'm leaning towards the traditional platformer. Some takeaways like memorable and distinct areas, respawnable enemies to earn currency, gradual progression of difficulty, and understanding the narrative will shape Ultranova regardless of genre. Creating an appealing story has never been my strong skill. Maybe it's because I find it difficult to enjoy storytelling, whether in a book, a movie, or a game. I struggle to focus and my mind strays away. I think about how the movie or game was technically made. I sometimes feel like I'm watching a movie set rather than a film. This is probably also why I prefer multiplayer games where you challenge yourself and measure your skills against other humans. If we look at how the lore in Hollow Knight is presented to the player, the Hollow Knight wiki describes, "The story of the kingdom of Hollow Nest can be pieced together through dialogue, cutscenes, lore tablets, visual storytelling, and entries in the Hunter's Journal. While there are some ambiguous elements, in general, the information derived from these sources can provide a stable foundation for assembling the overall narrative. As long as all sources have been exhausted and taken into account, a player should, in their own right, have a general understanding of any lore topic. I'm different from the generic player, and I understand that a compelling story is important for many to enjoy games thoroughly. Since I lack the skills and passion, I initially tried out AI to help me with the story for Ultranova. It felt interesting at first, but as pointed out by one of my viewers, it had several flaws. Mainly, the grander story did not make sense. It had interesting ideas, but they soon began to contradict one another. The AI sounded like it was making these things up, but all ideas and names it came up with can be found in other stories, games and movies. It's not easy to know where these characters or stories came from. In a GDC YouTube video called A Q&A Session for New Game Writers, multiple professional writers practically said to leave the game writing to someone who has the skills, experience and passion for doing it. I suppose they want to sell their services, but they have a point. This is one area where I seek help for Ultranova because the story is one of the key ingredients that could make it successful. The lore and story of an adventure game are important to make it captivating. If storytelling is not your thing, find someone who can help or who you can hire. Don't rely on AI to write you a good story. It will be broken and borrowed from who knows where. Make sure the story is well reflected in the game through NPC communication, narration, artifacts, cutscene, and world design. In addition to jumping, killing enemies, and world exploration, there are more mechanics in the game. What happens when you die is important to decide. Some games have a checkpoint where you respawn, and some make you start over. In Hollow Knight, you die when your health bar, disguised as 5 masks or lives, reaches 0. You drop your currency when you die, and you need to find your way back to the corpse, and in a unique twist, you have to fight your own corpse to get your currency back. You also earn soul when you strike enemies, and soul can be used to focus to regain lives and cast spells. The spells are magical attacks that you can acquire and upgrade. You can also buy or earn charms that can be equipped to enhance your powers. For example, you can equip a charm to attract currency so you don't have to collect every coin. I had to equip another charm that gathered more soul so I could defeat Hornet. I must have tried 15 times before I learned the patterns to defeat her. I nearly ran out of patience here because when I died I had to keep running back through the world. You spawn at the last park bench you sat down at, and I kept having to run back to Hornet and first knock out my ghost to regain my currency, which fortunately enough is simple, and then try to defeat the boss. You can also gain abilities to move more effectively and defeat enemies with skills like dashing, wall jumping, super dashing and double jumping. Abilities are not introduced quickly, and I think I played for 4 hours before I gained the first dashing ability. This slow pacing is good for me because it takes a while for my brain to combine jump, dash and attack rapidly. The pacing and delicate balance in Hollow Knight allows the player to learn the controls, navigate the world and gradually face tougher challenges and opponents. It's hard to find and maintain this balance. Some players will think it's too hard, some will think it's too easy. But the real challenge is to maximize the number of players who can evolve at the pace without getting bored or stuck for too long. It's rewarding to unlock a new area when you have been taught how to cast a spell or when you gain the ability to dash. The game carefully prepares you for enemies and bosses in ways like a boss turtling into its shell when you get near, making it impossible to attack in a normal way. You know you will need a ranged attack to defeat that enemy. Strongly consider death and how it affects the player's willingness to keep playing. Don't introduce all mechanics at once. Gradually make them available to match players' skill progression. Basic platform jumping and basic attacks are not enough. Complement them with more mechanics that fit the theme. Don't overwhelm the player with too many new mechanics. Find one mechanic that is unique to your game and let the players reuse the skills that they've learned in other games. Hollow Knight features a 2D hand-drawn art style. According to the interview, the art was drawn on paper, scanned by taking a photo using a phone, and then cleaned up in Photoshop. The camera follows the player in a parallax world, which is achieved by layering cutout sprites on different layers that create 3D depth in a 2D world when moving. Separating the background from the player, enemies and objects of interest is crucial in platformer games. Hollow Knight achieves this through common but effective methods. Keeping floors and walls very dark or completely black. Other games that do this distinctly are, for example, Metroid Dread, Mark of the Ninja and Limbo. Blurring the background parallax layers. making the player, enemies and destructible objects brighter compared to the environment, keeping a light and an aura of light around the player. The world comes to life with moving and twinkling particles, lights, swaying vegetation, illuminating objects and dust trails as the player is running. To emphasize the feeling of discovery, some parts of the world remain hidden in darkness until you walk closer to a passage and a new room is illuminated. Hazards like spikes glisten to draw the player's attention to the danger. Spikes that fall from the ceiling first shake and emit a rumbling sound and a little dust cloud. This allows the player to spot and evade the danger instead of randomly getting killed and annoyed. In one place, the floor rattles and emits dust, hinting that it's different and probably interactable. Will it fall if I walk across it? No. Will it fall if I jump on it? No? Okay, in the future I should probably come back here if I gain the ability to apply force downward. Other subtle but clever features is that the camera remains fixed in the vertical position even when jumping in areas of the map with just a horizontal corridor. As you enter vertical shafts, vertical camera movement is activated. This subconsciously helps the player understand where vertical movement is required, and it reduces the somewhat annoying vertical movement when you perform jumps in horizontal parts of the world. I'm not convinced that it's good to have inconsistent camera behavior though. The art style in Hollow Knight is different from many other games. It's not a common pixel art style. It's not a common vector art style. The world and characters are hand-drawn and fit well together, and it offers plenty of variety through the 40 hours of gameplay to captivate and entertain the player. The recent game Grick, Memories of Azor, also uses a beautiful hand-drawn art style, and priced at $20 and with 644 reviews, it may have earned a net of about $76,000. Reviews are very positive and especially praise the art, but in a few negative reviews we may find why it's not been a huge success like Hollow Knight. Some feel it's annoying due to save points being too far apart. Some think it's bugs in the character movements. Some people get annoyed that there's no map. And some say that it's only 5 hours of gameplay and that it gets repetitive after 2 to 3 quests, and puzzles and Metroidvania parts are too light. Use an art style that you are capable of creating. Make sure you can produce enough quantity of art to make the world, objects, items and enemies varied. Separate the player and objects from the background. Make floors, walls and ceilings extra clear. Polish the visuals by adding effects such as blur, particles, dust and lights, and animate movements of characters and objects to make them come alive. Spend time on the camera movement. Follow the player smoothly and avoid unnecessary movement during subtle actions. Highlight hazards or interactive objects by contrast, animations, making them glisten, or through particle effects. The art style will promote your game, and it's what will catch the potential player's attention. If people see a screenshot scrolling past in an X feed or a video clip in a YouTube video, it needs to catch their attention. Make it unique and beautiful enough to increase your game's chance of sparking curiosity, and make it a pleasant place to spend hours in while playing. Most of my channel is about 3D modeling and game development, but I'm actually also a sound guy. I compose music, I record sounds, and I do sound designs to create sound effects for games. Audio is an important part of a game, but audio alone won't make it a success. Hollow Knight features a beautiful soundtrack. In the fading town of Dirtmouth, your feelings are reinforced through sad piano melodies and somber strings combined with the ambience of howling wind. The music fades between areas of the world. As you go down to the Forgotten Crossroads, the music changes, and the melodies have a glimmer of hope. The wind is replaced by echoes of dripping water. If you encounter a boss, the music intensifies. Like in a movie, the music and ambience shape the emotional response, and it connects you to the action. There's nothing spectacular about the sound effects, but they fit the game well. Small footsteps reverberate as you run. Jumping up sounds like moving fabric, and landing on the ground has a nice muffled sound that makes you feel grounded again. Attacking has a couple of simple, randomly varied whoosh sounds. Hitting enemies and objects has nice tactile thuds, and collecting currency has a rewarding but muffled coin tingle sound. NPCs make mumbling vocal sounds, which not only adds to the atmosphere, but it is also a clever way to avoid expensive audio localization. Use music that fits the art style and story and reinforces the player's emotions. Music and ambience alone won't make or break the game, but it will increase the likelihood of people enjoying and playing it for longer. Sound effects don't have to be spectacular, but they should fit the mood and art style. Repetitive sounds should have round-robin variations to reduce the typewriter effect and make them bearable in the long run. Use positive and rewarding sound when good things happen. Use abrupt and stiff sound when the player does or hits something that has no effect. Consider using a fictional spoken language to save time and money on localization. Use sound effects for events off-screen to guide or prepare the player. I just said in the takeaway that music alone won't make or break a game, but I'm living proof of one exception. Turrican 2, released in 1991, featured music by Chris Hulsbeck. Not only did this music make that game legendary, but it inspired me to learn how to make music of my own. I literally left the game on the menu screen for hours, and I couldn't believe the melodies could have such an effect on me. For Ultranova, I want to pay tribute to Turrican 2 and its impact on my life and career. I will make a space synth-themed soundtrack for Ultranova. My goal is to introduce those feelings to the young and reawake those feelings in my generation. Ultranova will be a much faster-paced game than Hollow Knight, so my choice of music will be more energetic, but all the takeaways still apply. Being an independent game developer, I'm always curious about how things are made. I'm weird in that way that I would rather watch a 3-hour making-of documentary about a movie rather than watching the movie itself. I researched the making of Hollow Knight and maybe it can contain some insight to what made it so successful. I was excited to find out that Hollow Knight began with a couple of game jams. I have participated in 15 Ludum Dare game jams and it has taught me what it takes to turn a prototype into a fully playable game. It also taught me that when you think you're 80% done with your game, you're probably about 20% done. Game jams also taught me to continuously refresh my skills in all technical areas of game development, including programming, modeling, animation, UI design, making tutorials, music, and sound design. And it has especially helped me to understand that making a fun game is hard. In recent years, I have learned that what I need to do in game jams is to come up with new and interesting game designs. That's probably the fundamental idea behind a game jam, but I've failed to see that for some reason. Ari Gibson and William Pellon of Team Cherry got together for Ludum Dare 27 in 2013, and in a flash game they called Hungry Knight, they came up with the idea of a silent, genderless insect knight. For security reasons, I don't have Flash installed, and neither should you, but apparently you can still play Hungry Knight at a site called Newgrounds. Hungry Knight was rated 1 out of 5 stars, but these days it has 4.5 out of 5 stars. Maybe Hollow Knight fans have voted it up lately. In this case, I think that Ludum Dare made the team come together rather than forging a revolutionary new game. I think a key ingredient of what Team Cherry has is that they share a 30-year-long passion for Nintendo games. Playing those games while growing up, combined with a creative mindset and skills, enable them to make great game design decisions built on decades of playing, or should I say researching, successful games of that genre. This is the ingredient that I personally lack. I have not played this genre of games very much, so I have a lot of catching up to understand what makes them fun. That includes me playing the games, and it also includes me analyzing the games. I always like to share my knowledge and findings, so I'm making this video for you. Hollow Knight was made in Unity, and as described in an article on Unity's website, and this will be interesting for those of you who use blueprints to make games in Unreal Engine, all enemies and interactive elements were strung together using Playmaker, which is a third-party asset for visual scripting in Unity. The 2D art assets are hand-drawn, scanned, edited in Photoshop, saved as transparent PNG files, and layered to create the parallax effect. Instead of complex 3D lighting, soft transparent sprites are overlaid. In the making of interview, they described that once they got started with the idea of an insect knight exploring a deep, old kingdom beneath the surface of the world, everything snowballed from there. With 5 areas of the world complete, the developers ran a Kickstarter campaign in 2014 with a goal of raising 35,000 Australian dollars, which is about 24,000 US dollars. And they passed their goals into the stretch goals and landed at 57,138 Australian dollars, which enabled them to hire David Casey as a technical director and Chris Larkin as a composer and sound designer. If you have no clue what a technical director does, don't worry, neither did I. Apparently, it's a senior leadership role that understands both the technical and artistic sides, and in this case of making Hollow Knight, it involved making the game run and fixing things that broke. When I first tried Hollow Knight last year, I didn't have the patience to keep playing. When I gave it a second chance while making this analysis, it grew on me, and I learned to navigate the areas of the world. I filled in some regions of the map, defeated bosses, gained abilities and charms, and I got excited as I unlocked new parts of the world. It's no fluke that this game is so praised and successful, and maybe the most important takeaway in this analysis is to take the time and carefully consider all the design choices along the way. Make sure everything has a purpose and contributes to the overall experience. Ensure that good pacing is maintained, which has to be confirmed by relentless testing and feedback from people testing the game. You can find links to articles in the description, and I advise you to buy Hollow Knight and play it for yourself purely for enjoyment, or to study for yourself what a masterpiece looks like. Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button if you learned something, and subscribe if you want to learn more, or tag along on the ride when I develop my own action-adventure platformer, Ultranova.